My daughter will be let's see.
Guys, quiet down. Okay, start again.
Okay, I'm telling you guys about how I want you guys to think about this, not as a fixed lecture, but as about a way to kind of unlock the thinking potential you guys already have, one, and two, most importantly, to apply it to debate. Sometimes we sit and we have cool conversations, we think of all manner of crazy, awesome things. I've had some very cool debates with some of you guys on Facebook as well, where it's been like incredibly thought-provoking, and I really go crazy on Facebook. But the important thing about that is that A, you must be able to have some tools to allow you to argue and win. It's not just about being able to argue, it's about being able to access all this knowledge and all this training that's being poured into you guys at will. And I feel that this type of analysis will be something that I'm going to show you now is a tool that will also be explaining to you what are some of the general pitfalls that you get with this type of analysis. This is really interesting. It's not debatey in a classical sense, but there are things we can talk about, and I want some participation as the session goes on. So what are we going to be talking about? Firstly, I'm going to give you just a few objectives of the way I see this thing rolling up, and I think you can take whatever you want out of it. And I hope that you really get a chance to open up the way your mind works, right? I'm going to talk about what are general arguments, what is general analysis, what are stock arguments as some people call them, and then I'll go through some of what are my favorite, what we call stock arguments or general arguments. First one being the game theory argumentation. I've got three very cool examples. We're going to be talking a lot, interacting a lot about what game theory means, first of all, and second of all, what a useful tool it can be in analysis and debate. Henry and I were sitting yesterday at work, and I was like, Henry, that's what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. And it turned out to be like a half an hour discussion.
An hour and a half.
Which is quite crazy, because I was literally just walking past him to go to the bathroom and then, hey, guess what I'm going to say tomorrow? And it became a very long discussion. Game theory, incredibly interesting. I definitely want to extract some more out of you guys who used this kind of argumentation before, and I find it very fun. Second of all, lottery of birth. I've actually got a video here, Michelle, Ruan's speech at the Spinal.
Oh.
To show to you guys. Ruan was my partner, my very first partner at PANS, and then he did this whole thing. We decided to study. So we never really made it to nationals together. But the point of the matter is, you're gonna see a very interesting tool, a very interesting way of using birth lottery. And during Afrikaans debate, I saw some of you guys were involved in Afrikaans debate. I saw them falling into pitfalls of using the argument. You don't win the argument just by saying lottery of birth. Actually, I would say you're doing injustice to your argumentation by actually even calling it lottery of birth. It's important to be able to know how to use the tools, not just to flag the arguments. And this is a general thing about whenever you do debate and you learn something new, just know that whenever you refer to it by its name, you've lost it. You've lost the context, and you've become kind of intellectually lazy. You still have the burden to analyze exactly what we're talking about. The next thing will be about mutually assured destruction, about math. Kind of talking to the concept, and I'll be looking at the US-Russia, and I'll also be looking at Pakistan-India math. What are the problems with mutually assured destruction? And I mean, our Berlin worlds. I was in one of the debates. Was something about an island in Japan that China wanted to take over, and the US should protect it or something like that. And I heard a guy from Queensland or somewhere in Australia giving a very cool rebuttal of the mutually assured destruction argument, and show how ridiculous it is. But I also want to talk to you about semi-final probs. You and Johan ran loaded gun theory, and I actually still think it was quite good the way they ran that. And they'll tell you a bit more about how they ran it. Remember the motion? Iran.
It was Iran, yeah.
Yes. And I think you explaining how kind of you integrated that into your debate was good. But I still think beyond that, we both of us went through too much. And the last one will be about cost benefit and comparative analysis. This doesn't really match the others in the classical sense, but I want us to talk about comparative analysis and how this should be the key of what you do in debate. You do not debate in an island. What you say doesn't mean anything in a vacuum. So it is very important to be able to contextualize what you're saying, put it in a context, and that context is not the world, it's the debate. And second thing, to be able to kind of like build from that, to be able to show why your argumentation is better or more compelling than the other teams. So, objectives. I want us to understand the elements of the general analysis or stock argumentation. I want us to understand the uses and functions of general argumentation, what it is and what it is not. Understand and apply game theory, the cost-benefit analysis idea, a bit of lottery of birth. It's a very useful type of argumentation to learn. And of course, the mad dynamics, and of course, how to destroy it. Good. Listen, any questions? Let's go. So, general features, there are many other features, and I thought up 4, but I want you guys to give me more as you think about it, especially the guys who've come across this. We're going to come back to this later on as well, because I want us to really make this list long. What makes what I call quote-unquote stock arguments unique? First of all, what is a stock argument, guys? A stock argument would be one of those arguments that will pop up, that you've got in your back, that you've got in your back pocket to use in, well, different scenarios. This will be something that is kind of generally true, and you always want to access when you're in trouble or when you don't have something to give a closing or whatever the case may be, right? So one of the more popular, I'm just trying to think of what is generally popular, what you guys have been doing in the past 2 years. Have you guys been doing a lot of social contract?
Well, in general, we told not to run it because
it's horrible,
yeah.
But that's not the point. But as a matter of fact, something like a social contract theory type thing, or role of government, or some of the more basic questions you kind of always have to answer generally in any type of policy debate in one way or the other. You know, general arguments applicable to almost all situations, one way or the other. It's got a general skeletal form, and it's about you. It depends on you on how you will add nuance and add depth to that argument. That on its own is not necessarily always compelling, but it does give you a good tool to be able to provide depth to an analysis. So I listed 4 here. I said there's always a clear harm. The good-bad dichotomy is generally simple, and it's generally established. First of all, just from us talking, I would tell you now that on the flip side, you can always break that apart by disputing that same dichotomy that exists. And that's usually kind of the way that a good debater would start, by tearing up any type of argument, stock argument, by showing you that the dichotomy you created is a false dichotomy, or the situation you created has been falsely divided up. But of course, if you're on the right side of this one, then you're almost always fine, because these are generally accepted principles, or you block the debate into an area where that distinction makes sense. The next thing is it's got a strict form. You'll see as we go through these arguments, specifically the ones I chose, there's usually quite a strict form in the way they work. There will be n amount of scenarios and n amount of outcomes, and it will always be a that plus that equals that type idea in the most generalistic sense. So there will always be a strict form that has to be adhered to, but most importantly, that form usually has hidden and sometimes not so hidden assumptions, right? You'll be making an assumption of how the world looks. You'll be making a foundationalist or assumption based on foundational principles which you don't really feel like proving then, but you just want to test if they're generally acceptable. Now, if you want to know whether you're going in the right direction, this type of argument, you want to know that you've got a good solid base for developing this type of argument. So, I mean, if we go and attack the idea, or at least lash to the idea that murder is bad in all situations in all countries around the world, that doesn't matter your conception of the world, murder is bad. If you're willing to latch onto that as a general principle from which you'll be launching some sort of stock argument, then you understand we can generally be happy that we're going in that direction. And I think it's one of the most simplest ones you want to go with. So some of these assumptions, of course, rear their heads up in a very ugly way. I was telling you now on the trial that we had a debate somewhere. Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, we had a debate somewhere, and the idea was around how murder is bad. And we, myself and Gwyneth Hanks, and we brought up the argumentation that, well, the kind of murder, the way in which we see murder as the ultimate end, as an irreversible decision, is purely a Western concept of murder seen from a Judeo-Christian view of the world, that you only kind of get one roll at this dice. Now, if you do get more than one roll at this dice called life, what does that mean for concepts like murder? If divine retribution exists and you can, reincarnation exists, what does this mean for the severity of murder? Is it then okay to let the murderer go free because we believe that he will suffer in the next life anyway? You understand? Things like that. And that's just an example of the unique way in which you can like, transcend some of these binaries. But the most important thing is those things are difficult to fly, and if you can't execute it well with the right amount of depth, it usually comes out as a disaster. So, and like I said, simple counterpositions is what I was actually going to lead into with that murder example. So, uses. For me, as a rudimentary tool for debate. So when I started debating, I was already a bit older. I'm not going to say which year I was, but I was not a failure. I was older. And I needed tools, and I needed tools to let me be able to generate matter fast, because that's what I thought that was debate, say lots of things. And I had this recipe, so to speak. I think I've shown it to Kumini and to Michelle. You remember my file? Yes.
You bribed me with it.
Huh?
You bribed me with it.
Didn't I give it to you?
No.
I couldn't find it.
They were promises, so no.
That's like
so I'll get it to you, sorry. And the most important thing there is I had a formula. I think I've shown you. What is the harm in the debate? Is it this type of debate, this type of debate? Move into this portion. Now let's look at the actors. Let's look at the standard arguments. Let's bring the actors and the standard argument together. And then let's build now the general argumentation. Let's look at reputation and link it to the argument so I can twist whatever bad is about my policy and turn it into something good. And I used to have this A equals B equals C equals pi. You understand? And this pi was not the thing that I throw at people during debates. On the one level, it allowed me to be able to generate massive amounts of matter when I started using it. So we were able to sit there and have a case of 6-7 points of positive arguments and be able to analyze all of them from closing gap and be very effective at like matter dumping from closing, which you rarely get. But if you do it enough, it makes it seem like opening silos and doing anything. But as a matter of analysis and deepening what you're saying, I realized anyway that I kind of lacked that. But at least I was at a stage in my development where generating matter became more organic. So it became a more part of my thinking process. The way I generally think about how I answer people about things was used to generate matter, and I wasn't that reliant. But the important thing is, if you don't have such a framework, if you're still testing the way you think about things, it's sometimes important to have a tool that you can access, that you can understand, and you can have faith in or trust in your ability to analyze, to always flesh out something that's like always there, like actor analysis. If you're in closing down and you're seeing that this whole philosophical debate is happening about government and about how good this is for the people, but no one has really analyzed the people, then it gives you a unique opportunity to walk in and say, by the way, these are the people you were talking about, and this is why what you're saying is completely ridiculous to like most of them. So an example of this is, I actually wish I had this video, because I told John Marco the other day, and I think it's a good speech you really have to watch. We've talked about this one to death. I don't know if you remember anything I say. So, so it was Colgate IV 2012, just after you guys came back from Manila. And It was a guy called, I don't know if you remember, Paul Jones and Ben Walker. Yes, they were Oxford A, and they were speaking in this Ivy in New York. And the motion was this house would ban for pictures of Muhammad. I have never seen, because what happened is the first two teams are two random American teams. And the team at the bottom was now Sydney A, which was Sydney A at Worlds, by the way, and Oxford B now, Oxford A, which were Oxford A at Worlds. So both these teams were there. And the opening half developed like a normal debate would, right? The closing half tore everything apart. So I'm going to explain this debate slightly, just so because it really excites me how the debate opened. So opening Gov walks up there. Opening Gov's like, we believe we're going to ban the pictures of Muhammad because this is explicitly stated in the Quran as something that you're not allowed to do, depict Muhammad. Mistake number one, and it's factually incorrect. And then she carries on with the normal classic vanilla argumentation against free speech. Why should it's really like classic vanilla argumentation about when should states impinge on someone's right and rights weight and that type of argumentation, which was good but wasn't really responsive. Opening Up came up and pointed out the area that Opening Gov made and explained about the doors of interpretation being closed under the Second Caliphate of Baghdad and how Muslims before that were allowed to personalize and interpret Muhammad as a person, that wasn't allowed, and all the sects that broke out before then are also then Muslims by description, but they believe that obviously now certain things like depictions of Muhammad they don't agree. And then they were all about the discussion must happen internal and can happen external. It's about freedom of speech and about South Park and all of this stuff. It was just around Trey Parker's situation when they had Muhammad with a bomb strapped to his chest and and then Millen's posting comic strip in the early 2000s, and then then the debate started. Like opening half was like fine, and then the debate started. Closing Gov come up there, and basically they call the people who want to put Muslims down racists, like a bunch of largely European racists who do not want to see these people being put down, and then they go and they show that this is not a sign of offense. It's not enough to just say I am offended, but they actually then went to show how that offense leads to take away the agency of that person. Right? That's the kind of line opening or closing Gov was giving. Then closing Up came and they hit that debate like a pinata. Guys, it was amazing to watch. First of all, they talk about how media and pictures are fundamentally different from the written word, and how sometimes you need a visceral react. You need something visceral to show people and to express their moral outrage, for instance, is something incredibly important to do in a pluralistic society where we're talking about the things that make us angry, etc. And about the immediacy of the access to that picture. And then they also explain this entire thing about, and then the whip came up, and this is where this is going to marry into this. The whip comes up and someone raises an argument about offense. So closing out says, so you've conceded that our argument is about agency and not offense, and what is actually your issue? And Will comes up and he says, okay, let's have a look at these people you are trying, these marginalized Muslims you want to protect. First of all, you're ignoring feminist Islamic scholars who use the pictures of Muhammad to kind of reinterpret Muhammad according to feminist principles. You are ignoring the reformists who want to use the depictions of Muhammad to kind of attack the status quo in terms of the traditional Islamism. And then he went and said, the only people that you are really protecting with this policy are the people that racists identify with Islam. And this is a brilliant example of how, just quickly as a tool, he took actor analysis And he made us really look at the actors that we've been talking about all the way. This was in his whip speech, towards the end of his whip speech. And he took this, rolled it out like